This is a follow-up video to my previous one about how what is often called the greatest strength of ENTPs, the debater type, can actually be a sign of immaturity. And I recognize that was a controversial statement to make, and so that video generated a lot of great discussion and comments and questions and feedback. And so I thought I would create a video to address some of what I read and to finesse some of the points that I made. It's tricky with, as someone who has, humbly speaking, a lot of expertise in ENTPs. I've done a huge amount of personal growth work myself, and I've coached many, many ENTPs who have these kinds of challenges. It's tricky to kind of figure out how much context to give in a conversation like this, and how long a video to make to set up the points that I'm making, because I feel like the last video was really touching on a pretty advanced part of the ENTP psyche, and so that there's just a lot of kind of foundational elements that need to be in place to be able to talk about that. And everyone is on their own journey as well. Different pathways starting at different points, and everyone's journey looks different. And so this particular type of growth that I'm talking about has very much applied to me in my life and to many of the ENTPs I've worked with. I think especially ENTPs who are Enneagram type 5s. But this certainly won't apply to every ENTP. And so, I definitely don't want to suggest here that I have all the answers for everyone, and that I'm somehow more evolved or anything like that. I'm just saying this has been a very deep, growthful topic for me to explore in myself, and I made that video because I was really noticing a lot of just feeling like I'm peeling back the layers of the onion, and I had just finished over the weekend peeling back yet another layer of examining how my mind works. And so I thought I would offer some of that to anyone who might be at a similar layer of the onion in that regard. Okay, that's a lot of preamble, so I'm going to jump into a few specific things. First, when I said that this analytical debating might be kind of a sign of immaturity, I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean it, perhaps a better way of putting it might be just a part that warrants more development, or a blind spot, or just an indicator that there might be something interesting worth exploring in this area of the analytical mind versus the emotions. And so, some people have pointed out, well, ENTPs, a lot of ENTPs are actually very emotional. If you watch videos of them, they often seem very passionate, right? Very big energy. And so, am I crazy for suggesting that ENTPs are not in touch with their emotions and they're purely analytical, right? So I think what I mean here is certainly a lot of ENTPs have that passion, that big energy. But what I'm talking about is more of the nuances of understanding your own emotional landscape. And I think what can happen for a lot of ENTPs is when you're in debate mode, when you're in deep conversation mode of passionate about a topic and really wanting to convince someone of something, what can happen is that the main emotion that you're experiencing is this emotion of kind of excitement, winning. I want to defeat this person in battle. I want to prove them wrong. I want to educate them. I want to liberate them. I want to elucidate them, or I want to help them. I want to solve their problem. I have the answer. I want to explain how they're missing something, how they're getting it wrong, and how if they could just believe this thing that I know, they'd be better off. And again, I have everything I'm talking about here, I have been very guilty of. That's why I made that video, because after this weekend, I just felt these kinds of revelations about these bad habits that I've had in the past. And so what I'm talking about here, about being more in touch with feelings, is noticing when you're just very focused on defeating the other person, and it's that kind of pushing energy versus the energy of, wait, as we're having this conversation, how is this actually impacting me emotionally? If I am this passionate about this topic, then why? What is going on here? Why do I care about this so much? Is it that I feel like my identity is on the line? Am I being threatened in some way? Is my expertise being threatened? Are they not respecting me? Do I need to prove something to them? Or is it simply the joy of, I love talking about this subject? Or it's just fascinating to me. I'm so curious, childlike wonder, right? Those are very different types of emotions. So that's what I'm talking about there, about being able to slow down enough to examine what are all the different feelings that are alive in me right now, beyond just that surface level push, 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 convince, convince, convince energy. And so it's kind of getting away from just the interestingness of debate or the joy of debate, and more about the content of what we are debating. So I was talking about how, so many ENTPs pride themselves on being able to play devil's advocate, or being able to see all perspectives. And maybe not every ENTP is like that, but I certainly have been. I've thought I can argue anything at any time. And I've encountered a lot of other ENTPs who are like that too. And it's kind of this like detached feeling of the content doesn't matter as much. It's almost like this is just a game. This conversation is a game that I want to win, that I want to be skillful at. And so I can jump around and just play in the debate, but not really be impacted emotionally by the content of the debate, by the specific subject that we're debating, and how do I really feel deep down about that subject? And same, like I was saying, with kind of sharing news articles and things. Like, wow, this is interesting. I want to share this article with lots of people. Versus why exactly do I want to share it? And I think a lot of NTPs can get in trouble when they share something that they think is funny or interesting, and then people get offended by it. They're like, what do you mean? Like, you should just grow thicker skin. You should just laugh at the joke. It's just funny. It's just, it's intellectually stimulating. Why are you getting so offended? Why are you getting triggered? Right? And I think that's problematic there, right? Because I think some things should be triggering. So if you never feel triggered, then something's going wrong. I think that you are not fully in touch with the deeper parts of yourself, because I think life, human existence, gets really dark sometimes. There are things that should trigger you. Reading about some of the stuff that happens in the news, like, I used to look down on my mom, who's an ISFJ, sometimes when she would watch something on the news, like, oh, there was an earthquake in some other country, and she would cry about it. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, you don't know those people. They're way over there. Don't cry. And now looking back on that, I'm like, wow, that's amazing that she was able to cry. She was able to feel such compassion for these other humans who just experienced this natural disaster across the world that she doesn't know. And here was I being so cold and analytical, like, logically speaking, we shouldn't divert our attention to those earthquake survivors across the world because we have our own problems here. Like, yes, and sure, we only have so much emotional bandwidth to go around, but I think there is something deeply important about being impacted, being triggered, being, just feeling the whole range of human emotion. And so, let me see, I wrote down a few. Yeah, so I'm not saying that you should be sacrificing your logic. I'm not saying throw away rationality. I'm saying use feelings to complement logic so that you are a full human. In my coaching, it's what I call full stack human. So you've got kind of the mind and the emotion and the body and spirit, if you're into that, existential completeness, whatever you want to call it, right? That all these parts are important, not just the analytical mind. And so there's something that I want to say about that, about 3 levels. But before I get to that, I just want to address one other thing about when I was saying that everything is inherently subjective when you're arguing, and you think I'm arguing from a analytical, logical place, so I'm being a purely objective debater. Brandon, in the Type School community, thank you for your reply. You were saying you really disagree, and you think there are a lot of things that are purely objective. Like, if there are some coins on the table, we should be able to all objectively agree there are coins on the table, right? And I would actually disagree with you there, because I think that everything is actually filtered through our senses, our bodies, our nervous systems, our minds, the particular way that our minds have been conditioned by the culture that we grew up in and our life experiences. And so, for example, if you were to, get someone from an indigenous community living in, I don't know, in somewhere away from typical modern cities, right? And maybe in their culture, they use a barter system, or, they all just kind of share possessions. Maybe they don't have traditional money, right? You bring them in to the room and say, oh, can we objectively agree that there are coins on a table? They would say, what do you mean? What are coins? Maybe what is a table, right? They might say, well, I see these kind of chunks of money, or chunks of metal, right? And that's all money is, right? It's we've stamped some chunks of metal with some numbers and pictures, and we have agreed as a culture to assign value to these things, right? And so I would say, no, it's not 100% objective that these chunks of metal have value, right? That is subjective based on your cultural values. And this is the type of, that's an extreme example, of course, but this is really getting at some of the types of debates that I'm talking about, right? Because the times when we are going to get emotional, that we are going to get triggered, are when something controversial is on the line. So we're not going to be arguing over how many rocks are there sitting in front of us, right? Like, that's pretty objective. Okay, there are 2 rocks there, right? But that's not the kind of thing that we're going to be arguing about. We're going to be arguing about, is climate change caused by humans? Should abortion be legal, right? Should we gender pronouns, right? Like, those are the kinds of things that really rile people up, right? That really cause emotions to get stirred. And so those are the types of situations that I'm talking about, where it's important to not just let it be an intellectual-only debate. Because, something like climate change, right? If it were so obvious and objective, we probably wouldn't be fighting about it. And I mean, sure, there are other reasons too, like corporations, gas companies have vested interests in denying it and things like that, right? But I'm talking about, even just looking at numbers, right? Like, we can look at increasing numbers related to climate change, and people will interpret them differently based on their lived experience, based on how their minds have been trained, the certain schooling that they've had, certain podcasts that they've listened to, right? And so even the interpretation of the numbers is not objective. It is always subjective, right? Even something like gender, pronouns, right? Is gender culturally constructed? or is it built into biology, right? That is not a purely objective question. And if you try as an ENTP to take the purely analytical route and you're debating like, oh, I could argue either side. I could argue that gender is constructed or gender is not constructed. It's built into biology. Wow, like I'm such a skilled debater. I can just alternate sides. I think that is again that sign of either immaturity or that growth is possible there, because I think that is a charged issue, and I think you should feel emotions about it, especially if you think about the people who are really impacted by that. You know, people who consider themselves non-binary, for example. Like, it isn't just an intellectual issue. Like, this is an issue that really impacts real people in a real way. So I think that is a sign of maturity to be emotionally impacted by that. And so finally, I want to tie all this together with this theory that I have, or this framework that I have, that I've been thinking about for years. And this is actually the first time that I'm talking about it publicly, which is exciting. I think it can apply to all sorts of things, and there's more complexity to it, but I'll just explain it briefly now. I think of it as this kind of three-level theory. And it's basically saying that a lot of controversial issues, there are kind of three levels of, I don't know what to call them, like three levels of, not necessarily maturity, but three levels of like, let's just say three different levels of at which it's possible to see that topic. And so what we're talking about here about analytical debate versus bringing in your emotions as well and letting yourself be impacted. I'm not saying that we should be, again, throw out logic and just be purely heart-centered, purely following whatever emotions come up, right? So I'll describe three levels as it applies here. So level one we might call anti-intellectualism. So at level one, we might say, denying science, denying logic. I don't care about, what's objectively true. I'm just going to do whatever feels right, just follow my feelings. Level two might be, really being analytical, being logical, looking at evidence, measuring, really being in the head, trying to be objective. And then level three is, again, more feeling-centric. So it might look like level one. And level three is what I'm advocating here. So it's what I call kind of the full-stack human. Level three is recognizing the subjectivity, that it is impossible in most cases to be fully objective. And so recognizing that feelings actually are important. Logic is actually important too. Science is very important, right? Evidence is important, but emotions, intuition are very important too. And so in this three-level model, level one and level three can often look very similar on the outside. So someone who's making a level three argument, you might dismiss thinking they're making a level one argument. And so some of you who are watching this, who might be very analytical and distrustful of emotions, might be, might have watched my last video and thought I'm making a level one argument. Anti-science, anti-intellect, throw all that out, just trust your feelings, because it kind of looks at first glance like the level three argument that I'm making. Does that make sense? And so I think that's really a trickiness when you get into a lot of these debates about complex issues, and even talking about personality types in complex ways with a lot of nuance of trying to figure out, is this person talking at level three or level one? Because they can look similar. So, I think I'll probably stop talking there for now. And I hope that gives you more to think about and helps explain my position a little better. And I would love to hear how this video lands with you. So thanks so much for watching.